Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the second video in my series called House Hunters to Homeowners. In this series, I try to share my journey, my insights and learnings from buying my first home. My name is Brittany, and just over a year ago, I bought a 140-year-old Victorian in upstate New York that I've since named Florence. And my first video in this series was my unscripted house hunting diaries, the highs and lows, the emotions I went through. But today, I'm going to talk about the process and the things I wish I knew or understood a little bit better before I went into this whole journey and process. So, why don't we get started? So the first thing I wish I understood a little bit better was the expense. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. I think there's a lot of emphasis on the down payment with reason. A house, for most people, is the most expensive thing you will ever purchase, and that down payment, whether you do a 20% or you do some other percentage, it's a big chunk of change. But what I didn't understand until I started talking to a realtor were all of the closing costs that are associated with buying a house. And for me, those closing costs came in at about $10,000 to $15,000 in addition to my down payment. And there's a huge list of things, and I'll put them on the screen, but those are attorney fees, inspections, property surveys, courier fees, rate locks with the bank, property tax, PMI, which is if you don't put 20% down on the property. There's a lot. And I think it's important to understand, because as you're saving to buy a house, you want to know how much you might be able to put down. So that helped me to figure out this was the percentage I was willing to put down, because this amount of money had to be paid for the closing. And then I also wanted to make sure that I had some money left over to help me furnish the home, but also to save as kind of an emergency fund later down the road if I needed it. So understanding that, it is really huge. Number 2 is understanding the cost of living. Now, I think because of the state of the economy right now with inflation, all of us are acutely aware of the cost of living. I see it in my grocery bill. When I moved in a year ago, I was paying maybe $60, $70 in groceries a week. Now I'm paying more like $90 to $100. But understanding the cost of living is key for helping you to understand where you can live and what you can afford to pay for your mortgages and your taxes each month. It's really important. And I will say it's one of the things that made me the most anxious during the closing process. The week of my close, I was waking up in the middle of the night, practically in a cold sweat, because I started worrying that I didn't understand the cost of living, and could I actually afford to live in the house that I was about to buy? I would go through the numbers and the math on like a piece of paper in the middle of the night in a dark room with my iPhone flashlight to make sure I understood, okay, this was all of my needs, the cost of like my heating bill, my electric bill, my water and sewer bill, my quarterly garbage bill, my grocery bill, my streaming services, my other subscriptions that I get on a monthly basis. Like, could I afford all of this? And did I still have money left over that I refer to as fun money? But I also had to take into account that, like, I live in the Northeast. So whereas my utility bills in the summer might be like $100, $120, my utility bills come winter might be $500, $600. So was I okay with that escalation? Would I be able to afford the mortgage, the property taxes, the school taxes, my car insurance, homeowner's insurance, etc., 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 in addition to my student loans? because that, for the most part, my federal student loans have been paused for, at this point, nearly 3 years. But I knew I had very little optimism for student loan forgiveness. So I knew at some point I would have to start paying my federal student loans back. So would I be able to afford that in addition to all of my new bills that I was incurring? Understanding that is really important. I didn't want to be house poor. I wanted to be able to still go out to dinner with friends or to buy clothes for myself, buy things and not feel any sort of way or feel deprived. So understanding the cost of living is key. And it is also why I decided to live in upstate New York, because I understood that the size of house I could get would be a little bit more up here for what I wanted to pay. The property taxes and school taxes were also going to be a little bit lower than, say, if I lived 30, 40, or 50 minutes outside of the city. So understanding that, so you understand your budget, I can't stress it enough. It's almost as important, if not more so, than the down payment, because you don't want to be able to afford to buy the house and then you can't afford to live in it. 3. Now this might not be for everyone. This is a me thing for sure, but making lists, the importance of the lists you make and understanding what you're willing to compromise on. So before I even started looking at houses, I sat down, took an hour with a notebook in front of me and wrote down all the things that would be in my dream home. I wrote down around the cost that I would want to pay. I wrote down the names of the towns I might want to consider. I wrote down the style of house, hardwood floors, fireplace, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, did it have septic or public sewer, was it oil or gas? I went into granular detail for my dream home. These were the things that I would want. I sat down and I went through that list and I figured out what were the things I could not compromise on and what were the things that maybe for the right house, there was a little wiggle room. For me, those uncompromisable points were the cost, the type of neighborhood, gas stove, believe it or not, and also I really, 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 really wanted an older home. Those were really not compromises I was willing to make. Things I was willing to compromise on: the hardwood floors, the fireplace. I started off thinking it was a hard line whether it had septic and sewer, and learned because of the areas I was looking in that was something I might have to compromise on fairly quickly. I learned too that I was willing to compromise on the number of bathrooms, but I really, really, really didn't want to compromise on the number of bedrooms. I was okay with a 1-bathroom house, but I really, really, really wanted 3 bedrooms. Understanding this is key because it just makes the search a little less overwhelming. You're on Zillow, there are dozens of houses. If you can say, like, these are the only ones I'm looking at, like, it's a weight off your shoulders, but also it helps your realtor understand and send you recommendations that are in line with what you want to do. Because most of the time, if you're going to view a house, it's in the middle of the day. A lot of people work 9-to-5 jobs, so it's a lot of effort to be able to sneak out to go see a house. So you want to make sure you're only going to see homes that interest you, like that you have a good feeling about, that meet certain criteria. So number 4, finding a realtor you trust. Now, I got lucky. My realtor is a coworker's mother, and I had actually met her several years before I started the house hunt. I'd connected with her to let her know that I was hoping a year from now to be looking for a house, and that was in 2021. And even now, after I've bought my home, she lives in the area, and we go out to dinner and to get drinks, and we've gone thrifting and antiquing, and we just have a good relationship. Now, I know not everyone will want a realtor, but especially for a first-time homeowner, it was really helpful to me because I didn't understand this process at all. She really held my hand, reassured me, helped me to make the best decisions when it came to what my offers might be, because she not only is knowledgeable in her field, but she's also knowledgeable about the area in which I was looking to buy a house. She understood what I wanted from the jump and helped me to really narrow down my search to homes that really had potential for me, while also providing that much needed emotional support along the way. So if you can find a realtor that you can trust, who you feel comfortable asking stupid questions or what you feel are stupid questions, and who makes themselves available to you, it makes a really stressful process that much easier. It really made a difference for me along the way. So kind of along the same lines, you want a lender you can trust, and you want to get that pre-approval letter. So what a pre-approval letter is effectively a document from your mortgage lender, typically a bank, saying that they are willing to cover a mortgage at X amount. So basically an assurance that yes, you have the funds, the loan, in order to purchase a home. And in some cases, realtors won't let you go to a viewing for a house until you have that letter, because it shows them that you mean business, that you are not just scoping out the house just for funsies. You actually are planning and seriously considering buying a home at that time. So a pre-approval letter usually has a lifespan of about 6 months. You don't want to get it too far in advance because of that, and it does impact your credit score when you have to renew it. But you can usually get an extension from your bank if your house hunt lasts a little bit longer. In my case, I got several versions of a pre-approval letter at several different amounts so that I could share one that was closely aligned with the cost of the house I was looking at. So in no situation was I handing over a pre-approval letter that was saying I was pre-approved for $1 million, but the house that I was offering maybe $4,000 or whatever. So there's a little nuance, and that was actually a recommendation from both my realtor that I trust and the lender who I trust. And kind of like you do with a lot of things, I actually shopped around for a lender, which I would recommend. So not only was I looking for a bank that had a good rate, I wanted someone on the other end of the line who I could talk to and who I could email or call with, once again, my stupid questions, because this is the first time I did it, had no idea what was going on. And so on these calls to 3 or 4 banks, not only was I finding out what rate I might be able to get, I was trying to figure out if my personality jived with theirs and if the way they answered questions made me feel at ease and comfortable, or if it made me feel dumb or like I shouldn't be asking it. And that, again, made a world of a difference. So, number 6, house hunting and house buying is actually kind of seasonal. I didn't understand this at all, but what I learned very, very quickly, considering that I started the house hunt in January, is that house hunting in the winter, if you are in the Northeast, is the pits. Like, it really is, for a number of reasons. First, there's not a lot of activity on the market. People aren't necessarily putting their homes up for sale, so the inventory is quite lean. And there were times on my house hunting journey where it just felt like there was nothing for me to look at, and it made me so anxious that I hadn't checked out a house in weeks. Like, that is just the name of the game in winter. And another thing to consider if you're house hunting in winter is the weather. I had scheduled 3 house tours in one day, and the night before there was an ice storm. And so when we set out the next morning, it was beautiful. It looked like a winter wonderland. Like, every tree branch and leaf and everything was just glazed over. But it was so treacherous to get to the houses. And in fact, one of the houses had a pipe that burst in it that night because the temperature had dropped so much. So yeah, it's not ideal. Spring is when things start to open up. You start to see things being posted more. You also start to see more people actually house hunting, so it gets a little bit more competitive. Summer seems to be a really busy time, and fall, it starts to slow down again. So it is a little bit seasonal if you live in somewhere where you have a winter, like an actual winter with cold and snow and all of that. So keep that in mind when you're planning your house hunt if you're anywhere where you have to deal with that. So number 7, which I know is gonna seem ridiculous, okay? I know it because it still seems ridiculous to me, but when you are house hunting, you should be contemplating the resale value of that house. But should you buy the house, and should you one day down the road, if it's not your forever home, decide to put it on the market, you want to understand that you could potentially walk away with some profit. You don't want to lose money on the house you buy. And there are a few things that can impact the resale value. One is the area that the house is in. This is the one time that gentrification is a good thing. Like, it helps increase the property value of your home. But other things can improve resale value as well. So one thing that can impact the resale value are the types of improvements that you can do on a home too. So whether you can add an extension in time, or you can improve curb appeal, or you can add a patio or redo a deck, or, replace windows, remodel a kitchen, remodel a bathroom. Like, all of those things help the value of the property, those types of improvements. So are you going to be able to do that? Is there room for those sort of things to be done? But yes, any of these things can help you just to understand whether or not you can potentially walk away 5-10 years from now with a little bit of profit. So number 8, the process. Now you can Google this, and I did multiple times, but I was forever asking my realtor, what's the next step? What are the next 3 steps? What are the milestones I have to hit during this process in order to sign the dotted line and get the keys to my home? It's a process. All right, so you make an offer on a house, and you are fortunate enough to have your offer be accepted. The next step in the process for me was actually scheduling an inspection. So hiring a professional to come in and basically point out any concerns they might have about the structure, the roof, electrical, plumbing, appliances, etc., etc. Like, they go in, they do an inspection, you get that inspection back, and that can help you at times to go back to the seller and their realtor and say, hey, there's this concern, we need to negotiate this offer. So in my case, because it was a seller's market, there wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room there. But you get the survey done, hopefully all goes according to plan, and then you get the contract and you sign it. And this is when the fun begins. This is when you're actually in the closing process. So the mortgage application process begins, and you need to hand over a bunch of documentation. You need to hand over tax documentations, income statements, bank statements, etc. So the bank can do all of their underwriting and things that needs to get done so that they will actually sign off on the mortgage that they already pre-approved. You've been pre-approved, sure, but now you have to go through the actual approval process, and all those ducks need to be in a row. In my case, because there wasn't a recent property survey of the land, my bank required me to get one, so I had to find a surveyor and have them do that and pay those costs. And then there was the appraisal process. Now, the appraisal is effectively a third party that the bank sends in to do kind of their own inspection of the home. So they will go in and they will walk around the property, take a bunch of measurements, look at the number of rooms, bathrooms, floors, just really get a sense of the property. And what they then do is assign a value to the house. And the way they do this is through their own inspection or appraisal, as it is called, of the house, and then trying to find 3 comparable properties in the area that have sold, I believe, in the last 6 to 8 months. And then based on that, they will determine what the value of the property is in question, which determines how much of a loan your bank will give you. And this part of the process gave me such anxiety because I was like, what if my offer is higher than the property value of the house? Like, I was panicking, I was terrified, and I was lucky that the appraisal actually came out higher than the house. If it hadn't, then I would have been in a position again where we might have to go back and negotiate some with the seller and the realtor to say, like, hey, the bank is saying that it's actually worth this much, so can we reduce the property cost? Are you willing to accept this much for the house? Can we meet somewhere in the middle of what I offered and what the bank is saying? Or I might have to come up with the additional funds if the seller is just like, nope, 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 you said this amount, that's what I want for the house. So it was a very nerve-wracking process for me. It was. Then in addition to that, I had to find homeowner's insurance. So then it was a case of shopping around, trying to find a homeowner's insurance that I thought was affordable based on the house, and going through that whole process. I think I reached out to 3. I ended up settling with 1, going through that whole process, paying for that because my bank required the homeowner's insurance to be paid for the entire year. So then I had to pay that out of pocket as an additional closing cost. And then if all goes according to plan, your mortgage has been approved, everything with the survey, everything with the appraisal, everything with the homeowner's insurance, all of that goes well, you have your final walkthrough, which for me, my final walkthrough happened the morning of the closing. My closing was at noon, so we met at the house and we walked through the house just to make sure that anything that I had asked as part of the contract to be completed or in good shape was done. that they hadn't left a bunch of furniture in the property that I would then have to get rid of. All of that, I walked around, gave it a thumbs up, and then went to the closing where you basically sign your name 1.5 million times until your arm is a limp noodle and you just want to be done. You sit there for me it was like 45 minutes, which was really fast according to everyone, but usually it takes longer than that. But you sign a bunch of documents, you're passing them over the table, the seller is signing a bunch of documents, you have someone from the bank over there doing other things that I didn't understand, and then finally they hand you a folder with all the documents in them, and you get your key on a little key ring, and you have a house. And we came right back to the house, and I did a little walkthrough for myself, and it felt good. But the entire process, I think, took just under 60 days for me. I think I made the offer sometime in March, and then the closing was the end of May. And it was just a lot of up and down. It was a very, very intense process, and I didn't understand any of it until I went through it. And I probably won't understand it when and if I go through it again. But that is just a very sort of cursory explanation of what that process looks like. Number 9, the stress. I knew buying a house was not easy, but I did not understand how stressful it actually was. Some of that was because of the market that I was in. As I said, it was a seller's market. Every house had multiple offers. You really couldn't negotiate too much because they had other people in the wings. If you were too difficult or you were asking for a little bit too much of the sellers, it was tough. It really was. But it was also just a lot of up and down. Every time you went to see a house, you have this high, you're excited, you're energized, you're like, this could be the house. It's something that you've seen pictures of, and you're excited to go see it because you think it has potential, you think it could be your home. And you go, and sometimes the photos lie. Sometimes you go there and there's just something about the house that just doesn't feel right to you. And other times you go into a house and it's beautiful and it's perfect and you want it so desperately. And so much is out of your control. So much of it. I think that's why it was so stressful for me, because I could do everything right and the person who was selling the house could still go with someone else. Like someone could have placed a higher offer because they could afford to. Someone could have paid with cash, and then it kind of would have been like, sorry, tough luck. Not having control is stressful, and you don't have control basically the entire process. You have no control of what the seller decides, on whose offer they accept. You have no control of how the inspection goes, or how the appraisal goes, or how long the mortgage application takes because you're relying on other people to do their jobs. You are just completely at the mercy of other people. And there's a lot of rushing to do something and then waiting and kind of twiddling your thumbs. There's not much for you to do during the mortgage application process. You're just kind of waiting for someone to send you something and say, here, sign this. Or Houston, we have a problem and you need to address it. So it was bad. My skin was the worst it's been in a very long time. Stress broke out everywhere. My hair actually started like shedding at a ridiculous rate. I was in a bad mood constantly because I was just so anxious and nervous and at times frustrated and at times sad. Like, you just go through an entire wave of emotions until you get that key and the house is yours. And so for anyone who's deciding to go through that process, know you're not alone. It's a roller coaster, and just accept that. Like, even if everything goes smoothly for you, it's still a very stressful situation because it's a lot of money, it's your future, it's your happiness at stake. The last thing I wish I knew is that everyone is 110% right when they say, when you see it, you'll know. I thought this was a whole lot of hooey. I've heard people say that about wedding dresses and people they marry, houses. I didn't understand how this could be a thing, but it is. I walked into, I think, 6 or 7 houses during my whole house hunting journey. And I would walk into a house and I'd say no. I'd just walk in and it was a feel. No, this isn't for me. Like, in a lot of cases, there were reasons why. Number of bedrooms, the layout, the neighborhood, this, the that, there were reasons. But a lot of the time it was just a gut instinct. I'd walk in and I'm just like, no. And there were other houses that I went to that I was like, it was okay. Like, yeah, I could see myself living here. And those were the houses that, because of the market, I placed an offer in to see what would happen. But when it came to Florence, I knew before I even saw her in person. I saw the photos. I think the owner posted the photos on Zillow late Friday night. I saw them, and that Saturday I was frantically calling to set up an appointment because it just so happened that my realtor was out of the country, and I texted her and I let her know, and I went and saw it the next day on a Sunday. But I saw the pictures and I was like, oh my. Like, I had stars in my eyes. I was floating on a cloud. And then when I got here and I walked in and I saw original hardwood floors and a fireplace, and the house was 140 years old, and it had the this and it had the that. I was walking through this house envisioning myself already living in it. Even though I didn't want to, I was trying not to get attached to any one house because I had at that point already lost one of the houses that I was really excited about. I couldn't help it. I just could envision what this living room might look like with myself in it. I could imagine hosting parties. I could imagine having my friends staying in the guest bedroom. It all just came to me in like wonderful ultra HD vision. Like, it was incredible. And so yes, you will know there will be a house out there for you, even at those times when you feel hopeless and like you're never gonna find a house, which that happened a few times on my journey. There will be the one that you drive up to and you just know it's the one for you and for your family. So yeah, those are the 10 things I wish I knew, the 10 things I wish I understood when I was starting my own house hunting journey and the process of buying my own home, my first home at that. Hopefully you found some of these words of wisdom helpful, and you understand that it is okay to feel a range of emotions, from excited to nervous to terrified to gleeful to all sorts of other things. Clueless. I definitely felt clueless quite a bit of the time. But the saga continues. The third video in my House Hunters to Homeowner series will be 10 tips on the big move. This could be moving into your house or perhaps moving into a new apartment. I'll give you some of the 10 most helpful things I did to make my move go as smoothly as possible. If you want to see that video, be sure you subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!